Welcome to Sober.Coffee, a weekly coffee chat sharing experience, strength, and hope for anyone on the sober road to recovery. You can download Sober.Coffee weekly on all podcast platforms and check us out on Instagram at Sober.Coffee Podcast and on Twitter at Sober.Coffee Pod. To learn more about us and to help support these sessions, visit online at Sober.Coffee. Here are your hosts, two guys on their own path of recovery, Mike and Glenn. Let's join them at the coffee shop.
Big Glenn, how you doing? Big little Glenn, you've lost a lot of weight. You look great, really. You really look great.
Yeah, I have, and I've kept it off. So,
Right, that's the thing, right?
Live totally different,
Yeah, I quit drinking a bunch in my life. I just never quit drinking.
And you have
Yeah,
quit
now I
drinking
have.
and stay quit.
I have.
No, that's great. No, I was just thinking as we were kidding, you were asking Brian if he's ready. Brian's always ready.
Brian's always right.
Yeah, he's almost
A
5
quick
years.
shout out to Brian.
He's been ready for almost 5 years.
Brian
What
hit a
stud.
little physical bump in the road. I'm just
Yep.
sharing his story, but when somebody has a bump in the road,
Hemorrhoids?
yeah, right. It comes to make you appreciate the people in your life. And Brian, we really appreciate
Absolutely,
you,
man.
You've been with us from the beginning here. We wouldn't have done it without you. We were going to buy those $60 microphones. You can podcast yourself, but we made the smarter choice, and you've become a friend more important than just our engineer. So thank you, Brian.
Thank you, guys.
So listen, we've got Keaton. You're back this week. You promised you'd come back, and you came back. So,
I came back for that donut.
yeah, that's right. So it's funny. We talked last week, and we got a good introduction on a couple things. Keaton's an author of a book called The Road to Hope, but so much more, a speaker and the lead in a ministry, as she called it, called iTHIRST Initiative. You're going to find a link to her book in our resource room. You're also going to find a link to iTHIRST Initiative in our resource room. If you've got any impact in your community or want to make an impact in your community, reach out to Keaton on those links and start the journey. We talked a lot last week about educating churches all around the world of addiction and how to embrace recovery within the walls of their churches and outside the walls in the community.
And we talked a lot about hope.
We talked a lot about hope, but interesting because we really do these things back to back, right? So Keaton really didn't leave and then come back the next week, right? So, but it sounds that way anyway. And it's funny because I was going to say, well, since last week I've been thinking, and really I thought of this because I've got some material
In the last 30 seconds.
The last 30 seconds. So it was since the last episode, but there's the thing in your biography, and it says like this. Keaton is a regular contributor of Relevant Radio, a nationally syndicated Catholic radio station, where she discusses issues, and this really jumped out at me in preparation for this week, of issues on forgiveness, healing, and addiction. We talked a lot last week about addiction. We talked a lot about healing as a nation, as a community of churches. But, there's a little word in there that you said, and you said it last week, too. You said forgiveness. Yeah. I was hoping we could maybe spend this session talking a little bit about forgiveness because I think it was a big stumbling block for me. It kept me addicted. I would not forgive myself. I would not forgive other people. I wouldn't forgive the parking meter that gave me a ticket, right? So I had a forgiveness problem, but what I've learned, and you and Glenn both mentioned it last week, I belong to a faith, and I had to do a lot of research to figure this out, but I belong to a faith that is a forgiving faith, and it has taught me to forgive. And first it taught me to forgive others, and then I came to the epiphany that, Michael, it's time to forgive yourself. Can we talk a little bit about forgiveness in this session?
Well, absolutely. I think that the lack of forgiveness or unforgiveness lives within us like a poisonous snake. I often think about it that way. That when in my journey of resentment, I told you that my marriage fell apart unexpectedly. Many years ago, my first marriage, and I had this unforgiveness, man, that I held on to, that I was, I woke up every day. How am I going to humiliate them? How am I going to, I just was. And I heard it described once as it's like if somebody threw poison at you, you would recoil from it. You would say, oh no, take that Clorox, don't throw that at me. But we hold on to the poison of unforgiveness. And it's just this poisonous rattlesnake that lives within us. And what I learned about it was when I hold on to unforgiveness, it doesn't go away of and by itself. It stays in you. And so what happens is that it corrodes you. And you become less and less of your authentic self as you hold on to this over the years. And I think that working toward forgiveness is really about helping ourselves. I put that forgiveness down, and what I said when I forgave, it meant I was no longer going to allow what you did to me to affect me anymore. I took my life back. I said, brother, you're going to have to deal with everything that you've done. That's your issue. It's no longer mine. I forgive you. It doesn't mean I reconcile, although I did. I had a blessed reconciliation with everybody involved because but it meant that I was going to stop that because I was the weight, the burden of carrying that resentment, that unforgiveness around keeps us sick.
Right. And if
you're keeps us sick, Mike.
Yes, and mentally, spiritually, and physically with the drink or drug.
That's right.
Glenn, we've talked a lot about forgiveness, and I know you're big one. The lady at the well, is your. But do you? My question to you is: do you think that? Do you have an easier time forgiving others or forgiving yourself?
So I think I'm amazed at how selfish or restrained people are forgiving other people.
Right.
Sometimes it's ego, they hurt me, but people don't realize the weight, the emotional weight that they have to carry with that around, and they're just hurting themselves.
Right.
100%.
And it's so freeing, and they say in the rooms, hey, it's like me taking the poison expecting you to die.
Mm-hmm.
That is so true, right? So through my journey, number one, the God I grew up with was very damning, very judging, judged everything I did. My mom taught me the thing when I grew up, be sure your sins will find you out, and I mean, I live with that mental trap, right? So finally I had to unlearn all that crap, and I learned about the loving, forgiving God. I learned about the prodigal son story where that kid went out and spent all the money and lived with the pigs, and when he came home, right, that father saw him coming and opened his arms wide open and said, son, my son is home. Right? He didn't sit there, with a notepad and say, okay, now, where did we spend the money?
Right.
What happened here?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you did this.
Talk about your addiction.
You did this. Yeah,
right.
You lived how many nights with the pigs?
Right.
No, it was wide open. None of it was mentioned. Welcome home. And he was on his knees just so joyous, right? So that's my new snapshot of my loving, forgiving God. So
Amen.
What I found out was, if he can, then I had this program called AA in the 12 steps, which has an 8th and 9th step. And I have so many amazing forgiveness stories of how people forgave me. Now, it took years of living differently, had nothing to do with words. I lived differently. My actions were different. So people thought I was worthy of easy forgiveness because of that. I had 5 years of living differently. Holy cow, Glenn's changed, right? So people were so willing to forgive me. Evidence that you can't refute. So then I'm like, okay, if God forgives me, and I really embrace that, and now people, I have evidence, I have facts about people who really have forgiven me for some crazy stuff. I think the next step for me was, maybe it's time to forgive myself. And part of that was also a transition of getting out of the past and living in today, right? And part of forgiving myself is I'm not living all the crap I used to live, right? So I'm not piling up the stuff, the regrets and the resentments and the remorse and the shame and the guilt. I'm not living that way today. So it was a long process. It was, my whole journey, unfortunately, I'm on the slow train. I mean, it was years that this took. This was not a light switch. People say, wow, I knelt down and God forgave me and I forgave myself and everything's great. Good luck. I don't think that's true, but it didn't work like that for me, at least. And it was amazing, that whole forgiveness. And today, first of all, I don't let people even bother me today. My expectations of others is zero for the most part. So if they screw up, I don't care. I live for me, not them and what they're going to do for me. And I just don't let people bother me. I'm so easy with, now I'll protect myself and not,
right, sure.
and not let you punch me in the face a second time. Right. But and I watch a lot of court cases and people just ruin their lives by not forgiving people, and forgiveness is free.
Right.
You get one of the biggest tools in life that costs you absolutely nothing.
Right. So I read a book. Now, I really should have been more prepared, but this is just conversational.
Come on,
I know, right? And it came from I believe it was a Catholic author. But anyway, the back of the book, it's on. I should just look at our website because it's on our website. But anyway, there was a prayer. And the whole concept behind this prayer was, here's the prayer. Pray for the person that you the same that you would be praying for yourself, and pray it once and then walk away, right? And I love that. And I printed out the prayer. I have it in my office at home. When I'm a little angry at somebody, I pull that prayer out. I pray for that person, all the things I would pray for myself, for spiritual health, for physical health, for whatever it is their needs are to be met, just like I would pray for myself. And then I give it to God, and away I go with my business. And it's a great recovery book. I think it has something to do. It was written about how the 12 steps is so biblically mirrors the Bible.
Yeah.
It was.
There's quite a few of them. It might be Scott Weiman's 12 Steps and the Sacraments.
I believe that might be that.
That's a huge book. We're in collaboration. We work with them quite frequently, and he's quite brilliant. But absolutely,
so
absolutely.
You think forgiveness is a cornerstone in recovery?
It's a cornerstone in recovery from everything. It has to be. And like you said, my background now, fellas, is I'm a theologian. So I went back to school for degrees in theology.
That's what I was going to do. That's what I knew I was going to do something.
Yeah, it is everything that you guys have been speaking about is true. There are these themes throughout sacred scripture, from the Old Testament to the New Testament, about forgiveness, about God's forgiveness of us. And I do believe, that with regard to forgiving ourselves, I think that you said it so eloquently, that we know that God forgives us. And the prodigal is a beautiful story. And like you pointed out, and the son makes that pivot to come home, but it is the father who sees him and goes running out to him. That running to me is everything. It says that God wants us home. He says that in Deuteronomy 4 in the Old Testament. It's called the fidelity chapter. It talks about God's fidelity to us, right? And the theme of it is the Lord says, I know you're going to go out there and worship false idols. I know they're going to be made of stone. They're going to be made by hand.
iPhones.
Right, exactly. And you think about all the things, all the idolatry today, whether it's drugs, alcohol, iPhones, social media, like all those things. And he says, but turn to me with a contrite heart, and I'm merciful. I want you home. And I think that whole idea is that God is forgiving of us, but we come to him with a contrite heart. He wants us home, and that we have to do that for others as well, And like you said, anytime if I'm holding on to the burden of resentment, I am punishing myself for what others have done. I'm giving them the power to do that. I want to clean off my side of the street. I want to be good with me and God. And I want to open that up, because that space that resentment is holding in me, when it goes away, when we work on that, that's where I can fill it with God. That's when I can fill it with my spirituality, whatever that looks like. And I do a lot of work in treatment facilities. I do a lot of work, and my people do, in correctional facilities. I'm writing a program. I just got a big grant to write a program for incarcerated youth, so that we could go in and bring them non-denominational spirituality sessions that will help them find meaning and purpose in their lives.
Wow.
And that's a big deal because we want to capture them. We don't want them to think that, oh, I screwed up now. I'm 17 years old. I'm done. We want them to say, no, no, no. There's a path for you, and it's about righteousness and forgiveness, and there's so much you can do, and there's hope, and there's healing. So we do all of that sort of stuff. And the self-forgiveness, when I'm working with people, and we do meditations when I'm in treatment or in prisons for people that are very much like the prayer that you spoke about, Mike, but it's, may I be happy, may I be well, may I be happy, may I find peace. And it's like a mantra, and you visualize yourself, someone you love, come back to yourself. Then we start increasing that circle. Somebody that you can't forgive, wish them well, then come back to you. Then do it to somebody in this room. And we do it for about 10 or 15 minutes. I'll tell you, the vibe in the room changes. It's a way for people very slowly to begin to put down those walls. And of course, we remember in the Lord's Prayer, he's not telling us to love one another. He's telling us to forgive one another. Right. So it's something we really have to work on, including ourselves. Forgiving ourselves, so important.
Yeah, forgive us our trespasses as
exactly
forgiving our trespasses as we forgive ourselves.
That's right.
So here's what I love about these last 2 weeks with you. Glenn shares a story about his mom saying, when he was explaining his addiction challenges to her in those desperate moments, and she would say, "Glenn, just pray," and he would kind of laugh it off, and then later on in life, he realized, wow, prayer does work. My point is this: I really thought with your biography, with your background, we'd be talking a lot about, and I had it with my mother-in-law, you just need Jesus and you're going to be okay. Mm-hmm. That's not the message I've heard the last 2 weeks from us.
No.
The message is that this is a real deal. It's complicated.
Yes.
There is no simple solution. There are multiple elements to recovery. Spirituality is absolutely key in that. But in addition to, there are this healing that has to happen, and we have the tools. And then I'll be quiet. We have the tools, or are learning them, because I learned more tools today and last week. These will now be in my toolbox to help me heal.
Well, I just wanted to chime in with that because I think you're right. And I think the words of Dr. Gerald G. May, Dr. Gerald G. May really, was a late psychiatrist. He passed away. But he was really foundational. He wrote a book called Addiction and Grace. And fellas, if you haven't read it, I would say it's a small volume.
Multiple times.
I would give it to you. I would tell you that it is brilliant. He is foundational to the interface, to studying the interface of spirituality and addiction and recovery. That one book and the big book, I think, are two, and sacred scripture, of course. But those two books, I think, are foundational to anyone's understanding of the disease of addiction. Now, all that being said, Dr. Gerald G. Mace had one quote that I think sums everything up that we're talking about. He said, freedom, meaning freedom from addiction. Freedom is possible through the mysterious incarnational synthesis, that means the embodiment within ourselves, of human intention and divine grace. So that means we have to surrender to God, but we got to do the work, the human intention. What is our human intention? Awesome. That is our intellectual honesty. That is our responsibility. That is our coming back into community. All of these things, the fellowships really address so beautifully. If we come into the fellowships, we are doing the interior work on ourselves, and we still have to rely on God's grace to do it. So I think it's not one or the other. It is in combination, the tripod of wellness. I just know that the spiritual leg of that tripod is the one that is most often ignored, and that's what we're aiming to change, because we want faith communities all across the board to understand their responsibility, to understand, to work with, to walk with, to stand with, to speak with those in the midst of their suffering, not only those that are suffering from the addictions, but their family members who so often suffer the same stigma and the same shame and do not get help for themselves. We want you to be able to understand this from faith perspectives, but it's the three working together. And Dr. Gerald G. May explains it so beautifully about the what's going on physiologically, what's going on psychologically, must be addressed. But the spirituality, so often forgotten, must be addressed. And before I leave, fellas, I want to plug it. We got a TV show.
Oh, way.
So I want to plug that too.
Okay, go ahead. Tell us a little about it.
All right. So we are very blessed. There is one of the largest Christian networks. It's called Shalom World. It's in 158 different nations, and about in the early part of March last year, I got an email from them that said, we're really aware of what you're trying to do on a global, plane, on a global network. So global stage, I should say. And they said, we want you to do a 12-episode show about faith and recovery.
Oh, wow.
So I did. I pitched. It took me a long time, but I kept pitching, and it came to fruition. And it's called Unshackled. So it's talking about what we have to do, to unshackle ourselves and to be unshackled. And it is faith and recovery. And it's going to air in probably the late spring or early part of June, maybe the early
that's great.
part of June. Yeah. And if you go to our website, iTHIRSTinitiative.org, it says Unshackled up there on the ribbon, and you could go see some of the promos for it. But we've got 12 episodes, and we're talking about the spirituality of recovery. We're talking about behavioral addictions. We're talking about gambling addictions. We're talking about pornography and sexual addictions. And what is the spiritual foundation? How does spirituality figure into each one of these things? How come I can't stop? So many people don't understand. Why can't he just stop? Well, we talk to neurologists about why we can't stop. So it's the infusion of faith, spirituality, and really the physiology, the psychology, all of these things that figure into this very complex disease.
I love that.
Yeah, so going back to that book, Addicted to the Grace, I was...
Yeah, it's going to be in our
September of
resource room, by the way.
2014, I knew I had to get back to the church, right? But I knew I had to go to the right church.
Right.
And so I went to this church, and they had an addiction pastor, right?
Wow.
And the guy spent 3 one-hour sessions with me a week, almost like a counseling. And the first one, he goes, Glenn, you got to buy this book. You got to read the book. And I've read it multiple times. It's great.
Amen.
And then just to underline what you said about prayer, reminds me, I went to a Christian college called Liberty University. Mm-hmm. And, they used all the words, and they had no idea. So this guy goes to study for his test, right? And I said, I'm studying all week. I'm like, hey, are you studying? He goes, no, I'm praying about it. I'm like, well, don't you need to study? He goes, no, I'm praying about it, right? So I studied my butt off, and he got a D, and I'm like, dude, I said, what do you think? And he goes, oh, I think it's like I'm Job, like God's testing me. Like, dude, you're missing this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's like going back to what Mikey said about my mom, who just said, Glenn, just pray about it. I'm like, Mom, you're a fool. I got 10 PhDs working with me, right? I got these 10 different meds I'm on. I'm like, Mom, it's so complicated. But I remember I had 2 prayers I said all the time when I was drinking. One was, God, please stop the shakes. And the second one was, God, please give me $1 million. And when I look back to my mom's just pray about it, and boy, she was right. It's just a big circle around of how she was really right. But I had to learn how to pray. And so what I learned and look at things differently, I don't pray for the Christmas catalog anymore, right? But what I learned is God answered the prayer of the $1 million because he gave me talents that if I get off the couch and I go out and work and grind and work hard and be the best I can be, over time, number of years, I can make $1 million. And God answered the shakes because guess what? he gave me a program of Alcoholics Anonymous where I get off the couch and I go to meetings and I work with my sponsor. I diligently work these steps and I build a relationship with God. Guess what? I don't drink. And when I don't drink, I don't get the shakes. So it's just a whole different way of looking at this prayer thing, because I thought it was the Christmas catalog. And now I never pray for anything. I pray for courage. I pray for strength. I don't pray for anything physical. I pray for other people. And boy, I'll tell you what, prayer works.
Right.
It sure does. It sure does.
Keaton, what could our listeners do to help your causes?
Well, you know what? We, if they're interested in learning more about what we do, or perhaps themselves enrolling in our courses, again, I send them to our website. There's a new course that starts in January. If anybody wants to come on board and become certified, it's certification through Seton Hall University to be a certified iTHIRST spiritual companion. I wrote that for parishes and congregations, but people all over this country are taking it. They're using it in treatment facilities, correctional facilities, the knowledge. They're using it in reentry programs. We're real big in a threshold program in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Albuquerque, New Mexico, Youngstown, Ohio. We're on 8 different Native American reservations, working with indigenous people, working with people who are traditionally underheard or underserved, working with family members who didn't understand the disease of their loved ones, or who did understand it and couldn't save their loved ones but want to do more. So I would send them, if they're interested, to the website.
Say the website address again.
Sure. It's www.iTHIRSTinitiative.org. And there they're going to find a lot of information. They're going to find information about signing up for our courses, which I welcome everybody to. They're virtual, so we get people from literally all over the world in them. I'm teaching a course right now, not only the Africa course. I've got 61 clergy from 8 different nations in Africa that I'm currently teaching now. I'm teaching dioceses. Diocese of Pittsburgh is taking courses with us. Our courses are in Spanish as well. We are getting all church, capital C, out there involved in this. And we also have a weekly online faith and recovery virtual meeting, which is called the Hope Zone. It's every Thursday. It is Eastern time, 5 to 6 p.m., so 4 to 5 your time, fellas. And the link to it, and we have guest hosts every week talking about their spiritual journeys, their journeys of transformation. What did that look like? Focusing on their faith journey and their journey of transformation. And there's always a link to it that's under events. You can just click on it and join our meeting. So we welcome everybody to be part of this greater team, really bringing faith, spirituality, hope, community, healing, in addition to the rooms. We need the rooms. We love the rooms. We need them. In addition to that, but a way for us to really understand how God is working in our lives and in our recoveries.
Keaton,
awesome.
I'm telling you, it's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate the time, especially after spending the last 2 weeks with you. You're really busy. I thought Glenn was busy. I think you two can run in the same marathon. You guys are pacing along. I really, really, really thank you for coming on. Would you come back again and keep us updated? I would be
delighted.
We'll put all the links up in the resource room. Keaton Douglass, it's been absolutely fantastic having you.
Thank you both for having me, and thank you to your audience. It's really a pleasure. I get fired up, so thank you, everybody.
Thank you
God
very
bless.
much.
Woo-hoo!
Thank you. Bye, Keaton.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for today's coffee chat. To contact the show, email us at podcast@Sober.Coffee. If you need immediate help, the AA hotline is 800-839-1686. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 800-273-8255. Remember, Mike and Glenn are sharing their own journey on the path to recovery. Any suggestions, medical or otherwise, are their own experiences and should not be viewed as professional advice. See you next week, and remember, there is a solution.